Please subscribe and share for more story. Miriam Hale stood at the entrance of the penthouse, the welcome mat warm beneath her feet, yet the air around her felt ice-cold. Her daughter-in-law, Lana Hale, held the door open just enough for Miriam to slip inside, her smile stretched tight across her face like it had been painted on. "We only invited you because we had to, Miriam," Lana said softly, but the softness was a blade. "Please just sit in the corner tonight. Don't talk too much. And for heaven's sake, don't embarrass us in front of the investors." Miriam blinked, stunned by the boldness. Lana didn't even whisper. She wanted the words to land. Inside, the sound of jazz floated through the apartment, mixing with laughter and clinking glasses. Miriam's eyes drifted past Lana's shoulder and found her son, Adrian, standing near the wet bar, shaking hands with a man in a gray suit. When Adrian noticed her, their eyes locked. Miriam waited for him to step forward, to defend her, to remind his wife that she was his mother, deserving of respect. But Adrian simply lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and turned his back. Something inside Miriam cracked, but she swallowed it down. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't give Lana the scene she clearly expected. Instead, Miriam nodded silently, stepped backward, and pressed the elevator button. As the steel door slid shut, the jazz, laughter, and Lana's smug smile disappeared behind polished metal. All that remained was Miriam's reflection, a 68-year-old woman in a navy dress she had bought specifically for this night. A dress that cost more than she usually spent on groceries in an entire month. She held a small gift box in her hands and tried not to stare at the way her own eyes looked swollen and tired. "This is what I've become," she whispered to herself. A mother who had poured decades of love, sacrifice, and loyalty into a son who no longer cared enough to speak up for her. She drove home through the Seattle rain, the rhythmic beat against the car roof matching the heaviness in her chest. By the time she reached her small condo, she felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out her heart and left only echoes behind. She set the unopened gift box on the kitchen table, removed her coat, and sat down in silence. The silence, strangely, felt clarifying. It wasn't just the party, she realized. It wasn't even Lana's cruelty. This was the final wound in a long list of cuts that had bled Miriam dry for years. She whispered her own name out loud, grounding herself. Miriam Hale. Widow. 68. 12 years had passed since her husband, Victor, lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. Adrian had been only 22 then, young, grieving, and uncertain about his future. Miriam had taken the grief of losing her husband and poured all her remaining strength into supporting their only child. She had worked as a head nurse for 40 years, taking double shifts on holidays and working nights, so she could be home after school. Everything she'd done felt like love, not sacrifice. She refinanced their home so Adrian could attend a prestigious university. She cashed out part of her retirement when he wanted to start a business. That's what mothers do, she always told herself. We feed their dreams with pieces of our own. But somewhere along the way, the boy who used to run into her arms had turned into a man who rolled his eyes when she spoke. And when Lana entered his life, sharp, polished, and dismissive, the distance stretched wider. Lana had never needed to raise her voice to make Miriam feel small. Her power was in quiet corrections, in subtle erasures. The first time Miriam visited Adrian's newly redecorated apartment, she noticed the handmade quilt she'd sewn for him during nursing school was gone. It didn't match the aesthetic, Lana said casually when Miriam asked. Thanksgiving invitations stopped coming. We already planned a trip, Adrian would say, avoiding eye contact. He started criticizing little things, her dresses, her stories, the way she laughed too loudly at restaurants. Miriam felt herself shrinking each year, hoping that if she took up less space, they might allow her to stay in their lives. Instead, she was treated like an emergency fund with a heartbeat. When the couple wanted to buy their penthouse, the bank refused without a guarantor. Adrian's credit was ruined from failed ventures, and Lana's spending habits didn't help. They came to Miriam with smiles and wine. It's just a formality, Mom, Adrian had said, squeezing her hand. You won't be paying anything. We just need your good credit. And he looked at her with the admiration she once knew. So she signed. She signed because she was needed for a moment. Back in her condo after the disastrous party, Miriam walked to her home office and pulled out an accordion folder labeled Adrian. She had never truly inspected its contents. Why would she? Trust had always been easy when it came to her son. But tonight, trust felt like a wound. She carried the folder to the kitchen table, poured herself black coffee, and began reading. Every line, every clause, every document she had signed blindly. As she read, her heart tightened. The penthouse paperwork didn't list her as a character reference. It bound her with joint and several liability. If Adrian and Lana defaulted, the entire debt would fall on her shoulders. They could seize her pension, her condo, everything she had left. Then she opened the statements for the joint account she had created years ago for emergencies. She deposited $1,000 every month, believing it would one day support a grandchild or unexpected doctor visit. Instead, she saw withdrawals for luxury hotels, expensive shoes, wine clubs, and weekend trips. They were draining her retirement as fast as she filled it. She read until sunrise, her coffee growing cold. But she did not cry. Something else rose instead, something sharp and solid. Survival. At 9 the next morning, Miriam stepped into the office of Mr. Davenport, a seasoned estate and financial attorney with silver hair and a desk that smelled faintly of mahogany and old books. He reviewed the documents she laid before him, humming thoughtfully as he scanned through each page. "Mrs. Hale," he said, adjusting his glasses, "you've been tied to their finances far more deeply than most parents ever allow." Miriam nodded. "I want out," she said simply. "Everything. The mortgage, the joint account, the power of attorney. I want to sever every financial tie I have with my son and his wife." Mr. Davenport tapped a page. "The power of attorney is easy. We'll revoke it today. The joint account too, you have full rights over it. But the mortgage is delicate." "How delicate?" she asked. He pointed to a clause she'd never noticed. "If the guarantor, meaning you, withdraws support due to financial misuse, the bank can call the loan. They'll demand Adrian and Lana refinance immediately or pay the balance in full. And if they can't, foreclosure," he replied. Miriam inhaled slowly. "Do it." Mr. Davenport paused. "This could end your relationship permanently." Miriam looked him dead in the eye. "It already ended. I'm just accepting it." The next few hours moved like a storm. Papers were signed, notarized, copied. Miriam left Mr. Davenport's office and went straight to the bank. The young teller behind the counter smiled nervously as Miriam closed the joint account and withdrew every last $18,000 that had survived years of siphoning. She asked for a cashier's check in her name and canceled the supplementary credit card Lana used freely. When she returned home, she made herself tea and waited. Her phone sat on the table like a dormant creature she expected to awaken at any moment. The first tremor came 2 days later. She was tending her hydrangeas on the balcony when the phone buzzed. Adrian's name flashed across the screen. She let it ring out. Moments later came a text. "Mom, the card declined at the grocery store. Embarrassing. Did you forget to pay the bill? Call me." She deleted it. An hour passed before the next call came, Lana. She didn't answer that either. Then a voicemail. "Hi, Miriam," Lana said, her tone clipped. "There's a glitch with the joint account. We're trying to book flights for our anniversary, and it says insufficient funds. Please fix this as soon as possible." Miriam exhaled softly. Fix this. Always her responsibility. The real explosion came the following morning. Mr. Davenport had already sent the letters to the mortgage lender, and the bank reacted with swift alarm. At 10 a.m., Miriam's phone began ringing nonstop. Adrian, Lana, unknown numbers she suspected were brokers. Finally, at noon, she answered. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Adrian shouted, breathless. "We just got a letter from the bank. They're calling the loan. They're saying you accused us of fraud. Did you?" Miriam stirred her tea calmly. "I didn't accuse you of fraud. I simply informed them I'm no longer financially responsible for your household and revoked the power of attorney. Mom, do you understand what this does? He snapped. We have 30 days to come up with $600,000 or refinance. I called a mortgage broker. They laughed. I can't qualify without a cosigner. You have to fix this. I'm not fixing anything, she replied. Why? He shouted. Because of the party? Because Lana was stressed. Stressed? Miriam laughed dryly. She told me I was invited out of pity. She told me to sit quietly so I wouldn't embarrass you. And you watched. Silence. The heavy kind. The kind that tells the truth without saying a word. Mom, Adrian finally said, his voice dropping to a plea. We're family. Family forgives. Family doesn't drain retirement accounts to buy handbags, Miriam replied. He inhaled sharply. That was for us. For our future. A Gucci purse isn't your future, Adrian. The phone line crackled with his frustration. We can't lose this apartment, he insisted. We renovated the kitchen. We have people coming next month. Where are we supposed to go? Miriam's tone remained steady. You're intelligent. You have a degree I paid for. You'll figure it out. Jessica's parents don't have space, he argued. Then that seems like something you and Lana need to solve. Mom, please. Please, I'm begging you. His voice trembled. And for a moment, just a moment, the maternal instinct in her chest twitched. But she held firm. My tea is getting cold, Adrian, she said. Goodbye. She hung up before he could respond. Her hand shook slightly, but not from guilt, from adrenaline. For the first time in years, she had chosen herself. And though the weight of it pressed hard against her ribs, another feeling rose beneath it. A flicker of power she hadn't felt since Victor died. The days that followed felt like a siege. Adrian and Lana tried every tactic, calls, texts, emails. When those failed, they came to her building. Lewis, the doorman, phoned up gently. Mrs. Hale, they're here again. She instructed him not to let them through. She watched from her window as Adrian paced on the sidewalk, shouting up at her balcony as if volume could reverse consequences. Pathetic, she whispered, not out of cruelty, but heartbreak. He looked like a child denied a toy, not a grown man whose own decisions had caught up to him. Then came the lawsuit. Mr. Davenport called her on a Tuesday morning. Miriam, your son has filed an injunction. He claims you promised lifetime support and that your withdrawal is malicious. Miriam closed her eyes. He's suing me? His own mother? It won't stand, Davenport said. But it shows how desperate he is. He wants to force your compliance. Miriam sighed. Let him try. That afternoon, she drove north towards Skagit Valley, letting the open road cool her anger. She passed tulip fields and old farmhouses, and for the first time in weeks, her shoulders loosened. She stopped in a quiet town called Lakener and felt something she hadn't felt in years, breathing room. Lakener was small, peaceful, and scented with salt water. As Miriam walked its narrow streets, she felt the noise of Seattle fall away from her mind. Then she saw it, a small yellow cottage wrapped in ivy, with a for sale sign leaning slightly in the yard. It wasn't perfect, the paint needed work, and the fence leaned like it was tired. But it felt soft. Warm. Hers. She sat on a nearby bench facing the water and stared at the cottage, imagining mornings with coffee and hydrangeas that didn't require hiding from anyone. She thought about her condo, bought to be near Adrian, near a son who treated her like an ATM. She realized she'd been renting proximity to a life that no longer included her. By the time she drove back to the city, her decision had crystallized. The next morning, she called a real estate agent. Her condo sold within 3 days to a young tech couple who adored its location. And with a steady hand, she put an offer on the cottage in Lakener. It was accepted that same evening. Miriam didn't celebrate. She simply sat in the quiet of her living room and whispered, I'm moving on. 3 days before the bank's deadline, the doorbell rang. Miriam checked the camera and blinked in surprise. It was Elaine Cross, Lana's mother. Curious, Miriam buzzed her in. Elaine stepped inside, clutching her purse like a fragile animal. She looked older than Miriam remembered, her expression weary. "Thank you for seeing me," Elaine said softly. "If you're here to ask for money, don't," Miriam replied. Elaine shook her head quickly. "I don't have any money to give them. And even if I did, I wouldn't." She sat slowly. "I came to apologize." Miriam froze. Elaine continued, "I raised Lana to care too much about appearances. I spoiled her. I made her believe the world owed her comfort. When she called me screaming about what you were doing, I asked her what she had done to you." Elaine swallowed. After an hour of excuses, she admitted what she said at the party. Her voice broke. "I'm ashamed." Miriam stared at her. "I appreciate your honesty." Elaine nodded. "They're packing. They're losing the penthouse. They're moving to a studio across town. It's all they can afford now. It might be the lesson they needed." Miriam exhaled. "Maybe it is." When Elaine left, Miriam felt an unexpected lightness. Validation, clean and simple. She wasn't vindictive. She was simply a mother who had finally stopped stepping into the fire. The bank's deadline arrived on Friday. The foreclosure notice was executed. Mr. Davenport confirmed the news. "You're cleared, Miriam. Your liability ends today." She nodded. "Thank you." She spent the afternoon packing boxes, sealing decades of memories into cardboard and tape. She hummed quietly to herself, feeling the strange calm that comes when a long storm finally breaks. But peace lasted only until evening. Louis called upstairs. "Mrs. Hale, your son is here." He pushed past me. "He's on his way up. I've called the police." "It's fine, Louis," she said, her voice steady. "Let him come." She unlocked the door and stood in the middle of her half-packed living room. Moments later, the door flew open. Adrian burst in, his eyes wild, his once expensive suit now wrinkled. "Are you happy?" he spat. "It's done. The locks are changed. We're homeless. We're sleeping on an air mattress in a studio that smells like cat pee." Miriam looked at him calmly. "I'm not happy," she answered, "but I am peaceful." That only enraged him more. "Peaceful," he barked, stepping toward her. "You ruined us. You had the money. You could have paid it off. You're sitting on a pile of cash from selling this place, and you let your son rot." Miriam didn't flinch. "That money is for my care," she said. "Because I finally realized something. You will not take care of me when I'm old." Adrian's face twisted. "You're damn right I won't," he shouted. "And I want you to remember this. When you're sick, when you can't walk or bathe yourself, don't call me. You'll die alone, Miriam. Alone." The words hung in the air like poison. Adrian believed he had struck a fatal blow. But Miriam stepped closer, her voice quiet but unbreakable. "Adrian," she whispered, "I have been alone for 12 years. I was alone every Thanksgiving you missed. I was alone every Christmas morning waiting for a visit you never made. You didn't abandon me today. You abandoned me years ago when you decided I was just a checkbook with a pulse." He froze. Miriam continued, "And yes, we all die alone. But I would rather die alone with dignity than live one more day begging for love from someone who despises me." Her words stunned him into silence. "Now leave," she finished. "The movers will be here soon." Adrian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His anger had nowhere left to go. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. But the slam didn't feel sharp. It felt final. Like a book closing. Miriam stood alone in her living room, surrounded by boxes, the air still vibrating with the truth she had finally spoken. She allowed herself a single deep breath. Not grief, not guilt, just release. 3 days later, movers arrived and loaded the last of her belongings. Miriam locked the condo for the final time, pressed her palm against the cool door, and whispered a soft goodbye. The drive to Lakener felt lighter. The city receded behind her, the skyline fading into open fields and water. When she arrived at her yellow, ivy-wrapped cottage, she felt something loosen inside her, like a knot she had carried for decades had finally untied itself. She walked through the front door and breathed in deeply. It smelled of pine, sea air, and possibility. "This," she murmured, "is mine." And for the first time in years, the thought didn't carry pain. Only peace. Life in Lakener unfolded slowly, gently, like pages turning in a book she had forgotten she owned. Miriam settled into routines she didn't know she needed. She woke early to sunlight filtering through ivy-covered windows. She brewed coffee without rushing. On Tuesdays, she volunteered at the small local library, shelving books and listening to children stumble adorably over big words. On Thursdays, she joined a walking group of retirees who strolled along the waterfront, swapping stories and jokes. One afternoon, she met Nadine, a retired teacher with soft gray curls and a wicked sense of humor. "You're new," Nadine said. "People don't just stumble into Lakener unless they're searching for something." Miriam smiled. "Maybe I was." They started going to the cinema together on Sundays, where they shared popcorn and whispered critiques about the acting. Nights in the cottage were quiet, but not empty. Miriam would sit on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to crickets and the soft lap of water against the shore. Sometimes she thought of Adrian. Sometimes her heart tightened. But she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't wait for apologies that would never come. She let the ache exist without letting it consume her. She was healing. Elaine called every so often, enough to keep Miriam informed but not burdened. "It's been rough for them," Elaine admitted during one call. "Lana's working as a receptionist now. Adrian found a job at a small firm. But they're angry. At the world. At themselves. At you." Miriam sat on her porch, watching birds hop across her lawn. "I'm not surprised," she replied. "They've never faced the consequences of their actions before." Elaine sighed. "Sometimes the fall is the only teacher." Miriam understood. She didn't ask for updates after that. If Elaine offered them, she listened. If she didn't, Miriam didn't wonder. Her life was no longer tied to theirs by obligation or guilt. Weeks turned to months. The cottage grew warmer with personality. New curtains, thrifted art pieces, small ceramic bowls she bought at the local market. The hydrangeas she planted began to bloom, stubborn and beautiful. Her evenings filled with books, the scent of tulips, and laughter shared with Nadine. There were moments she thought of Adrian. Birthday reminders she deleted, old pictures that surfaced when she opened storage boxes. But she let those memories float past her like clouds. Important, but not binding. She was learning to live without carrying weight that wasn't hers. 6 months after moving, Miriam traveled into the city for a dental appointment. She walked through familiar streets without the usual pang of yearning. She had errands to run, groceries to buy, a train to catch back home. But as she passed a crowded bus stop, she froze. There, standing alone with a worn briefcase in hand, was Adrian. He looked thinner. Tired. His once sharply tailored suit replaced with something older, creased from repeated wear. He stared at the ground, shoulders slumped, completely unaware of her presence across the street. Miriam felt something twist painfully in her chest, a mother's instinct, fierce and ancient. She imagined crossing the road, calling his name, offering him money, saving him again. The instinct flared so strongly she gripped the strap of her bag to steady herself. But then another thought washed over her, calm and clear. If I save him again, he will never learn to stand. THC bus arrived. Adrian stepped on without looking up. The doors closed, sealing him inside, and the bus rolled away into the city traffic. Miriam watched until the vehicle disappeared. Then she turned and continued walking toward the train station. Her eyes stung, but she did not cry. She chose restraint over rescue. On the train back to Lakener, Miriam watched the scenery blur past the windows, bridges, water, patches of forest. Each mile felt like a soft reminder of the life she had reclaimed. She rested her head against the window and exhaled. Sometimes love means letting go, she whispered. She remembered all the nights she had waited by the phone, all the years she had reshaped herself to remain acceptable in Adrian's world. She remembered giving without receiving, hoping kindness would earn her a place at the table. But love, she realized, could not be purchased with sacrifice. It had to be reciprocated or gently released. When she arrived home, Nadine stopped by with a basket of muffins. "Rough day?" Nadine asked. "Just reflective," Miriam replied. They sat on the porch, nibbling warm blueberry muffins. "Parenthood," Nadine said, "is the only job where you're expected to work yourself out of usefulness." Miriam chuckled. "I think I did the opposite. I made myself indispensable until I was only valued for what I could give." Nadine touched her hand gently. "You're building something new now." And Miriam realized she truly was. A life built not on obligation, but choice. Not on waiting, but living. Days in the cottage grew brighter as spring unfolded. Miriam spent mornings tending to her small garden, planting lavender and marigolds, adjusting soil, humming softly. She visited the market on Saturdays, chatting with artisans who greeted her by name. She felt part of a rhythm, slow, kind, human. One afternoon, as she sat beneath the shade of her porch, she reread old journal entries she had written after Victor's passing. Words filled with exhaustion and fear, the loneliness of raising a son alone, the hope that her sacrifices would build a better life for him. She closed the journal gently.
She no longer needed it as a map.
The future she had pictured for Adrian wasn't hers to shape anymore. A soft breeze rustled the ivy along her cottage wall. She watched leaves flutter, shifting without tearing, flexible, resilient. She whispered, "That's me now." Her phone buzzed on the porch railing. For a heartbeat, her heart leapt, then steadied. It was Nadine inviting her for dinner. Miriam smiled. She slipped on her sweater, took one last look at her blooming garden, and locked the door behind her. She wasn't walking toward someone else's expectations anymore. She was walking toward her own life. Summer arrived in Lakener with warmth that felt almost like affection. Miriam found joy in little things she had forgotten to appreciate: fresh berries from the market, handwritten notes from library children, the way sunlight painted her cottage golden in the evenings. One Sunday, after movie with Nadine, they sat by the water eating ice cream cones. Nadine nudged her. "You know," she said, "for someone who's been through hell, you glow." Miriam laughed. "I think peace looks like glow." Nadine bumped her shoulder gently. "You earned it."
Miriam thought about that.
She had spent so many years believing she had to endure pain quietly, believing endurance made her good. But peace wasn't something she had been given. It was something she had carved out with painful, necessary decisions. They watched the boats drifting across the channel, their reflections shimmering like soft brushstrokes. "Do you ever regret it?" Nadine asked suddenly. Miriam didn't hesitate. "I regret waiting so long," she admitted. "But I don't regret choosing myself." Nadine nodded, understanding. When Miriam returned home that evening, the air felt warm and still. She lit a candle on her nightstand and opened a book. And that night, she slept without dreams. Autumn arrived quietly, with crisp mornings and leaves that painted the town in warm golds and reds. Miriam raked fallen leaves into small piles and baked apple bread to share with neighbors. She felt rooted, like her soul had finally put down its own kind of roots in Lakener. One morning, she found a letter slipped under her door. Her breath caught when she saw the handwriting. Adrian's. She carried it to her kitchen table and stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Mom," it began, "I don't know what to say. We're not okay. Lana blames you. I blame myself. I'm trying to fix my life, but it's slow. Hard. I wanted to write because I miss you, but I don't know how to say anything beyond that." There was no apology. No recognition of pain inflicted. Just confusion and longing. Miriam folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply acknowledged the ache and moved on. Healing, she had learned, didn't require the other person to change. It required her to choose differently. She stepped outside, inhaling the sweet scent of cedar, and whispered, "I wish you well, Adrian." And she meant it. Winter approached, marking nearly a full year since she left Seattle behind. Miriam decorated her cottage with warm lights and baked ginger cookies for the walking group. Nadine gifted her a knitted scarf in deep plum. "Looks perfect on you," she said proudly. Miriam wrapped it around her neck and smiled. The cottage felt alive with warmth. On Christmas morning, she brewed coffee and sat on her porch wrapped in blankets, watching the quiet snowfall. She remembered past holidays, waiting for Adrian, waiting for phone calls that never came. But this morning, she wasn't waiting for anything. She simply existed, peaceful and warm. Later that day, she joined Nadine and a small circle of neighbors for dinner. They laughed over burnt rolls, shared stories, and enjoyed the soft glow of candlelight. Someone asked Miriam, "How does this holiday feel?" She paused. "It feels honest," she said. "It feels like mine." Everyone smiled. When she returned home that night, she stood in her quiet living room and felt something she hadn't felt in years, a fullness. Not from people, not from gifts or obligations, but from herself. Her life no longer orbited anyone else's approval. It was her own small universe, peaceful and whole. The new year came with rainstorms and resolutions she didn't write down because they were already in motion. She continued volunteering at the library. Children greeted her with cheerful shouts of "Miss Miriam." She joined a watercolor class at the community center and discovered she loved painting flowers, lavender especially. Nadine teased her. "Your whole house is going to be purple at this rate." Miriam laughed. She didn't mind. Her world could finally bloom in whatever colors she chose. One afternoon, while painting on her porch, she thought about Victor. She imagined him sitting beside her, hands folded calmly. In her mind, he said, "You finally took your life back, love." She smiled at the thought. She didn't live in anger or regret anymore. She lived in possibility. Later, while tidying her cottage, she found the vintage watch she had once bought for Adrian's promotion, the gift he never received. She held it gently, then set it in a drawer without sadness. It no longer symbolized rejection. It was simply an object. At dusk, she lit a candle and watched shadows dance along the walls. The silence around her wasn't empty. It was sacred, a space she had rebuilt with intention, truth, and courage. Spring returned to Lakener exactly 1 year after Miriam left the life that had nearly swallowed her whole. The hydrangeas outside her cottage bloomed richly, blue, purple, and pink, like small celebrations. Miriam brewed her morning coffee and stepped out onto the porch, letting the cool breeze wrap around her. She sat in her wicker chair, gazing at the water as the sun rose in soft orange streaks. Her life was quiet. Her life was simple. And her life was hers. She thought back to the woman she used to be, the one who measured her worth by how much she could give, endure, or sacrifice. The one who believed love meant contorting herself into whatever shape others found acceptable. "Never again," she whispered, not out of bitterness but truth. She picked up her book, turned a fresh page, and smiled. She wasn't waiting for apologies or reconciliation. She wasn't hoping Adrian would suddenly become the son she once knew. She wished him well. She hoped he found humility, gratitude, and growth. But her future no longer depended on his choices. "My name is Miriam Hale," she whispered proudly. "I am alone, yes. But I am not lonely. I am free." And the world around her felt open. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into me.